Hello today, and again I'm continuing speaking from the Acts of the Apostles. I'm finding it myself, even at my age, quite illuminating spending time in studying this particular book. And we're now on to chapter 14. We saw what had happened last time in chapter 13, and we find that Paul and Barnabas, because persecution was stirred up against them, that they shook the dust off their feet and went to Iconium. But it says the disciples were filled with joy and with the Holy Spirit. So there you are, that's an example. Just simply be filled with joy and filled with the Holy Spirit. So in chapter 14 at Iconium, Paul and Barnabas went as usual into the Jewish synagogue. There they spoke so effectively. I hope you're listening to me out there somewhere. They spoke so effectively that a great number of Jews and Gentiles believed. You see, you have to understand where Iconium is. Iconium is in the middle of modern-day Turkey. And so you're in an area where some of the Jews were because of the dispersion, but also you're really in Gentile territory. But Paul and Barnabas are speaking to the Jews in the Jewish synagogue, but the Gentiles are so moved that they have joined in. Right. But in verse 2, we've hit the problem. Because the Jews who refused to believe that Jesus was the Son of God and the Messiah, that's what they refused to believe, the teaching of Paul and Barnabas. The Jews stirred up the Gentiles. Oh dear, now look at what's happening here. They stirred up the Gentiles and poisoned their minds against not only Paul and Barnabas, but these others who were believing in the teaching of Paul and Barnabas. So, despite that, by the time we come to verse 3, Paul and Barnabas still spent considerable time there speaking boldly for the Lord, who confirmed the message by enabling them to do miraculous signs and wonders. It's very interesting that despite the opposition that's growing, as we shall see shortly, what's happening is this: Paul and Barnabas didn't stop at this point. They continued boldly. Come on, because Christians, we need some boldness today. Come on. Don't give up. It's too easy to just say, oh, no, and give up. No, they continued boldly. And the interesting thing is that the Lord so confirmed the word they were speaking with this boldness that he confirmed it and enabled them to do miraculous signs and wonders. You see, the trouble is that so much of the church has lost all sense of what the church was in the early days in the Acts of the Apostles. You find that the church grew because of miracles, that God confirms his words with miracles and with signs and with wonders. And I mean, that has been probably one of the most amazing things about my own ministry. It's not just the simplicity of the gospel I preach, but the incredible miracles that have followed where I preached with boldness. So the Lord confirmed the message and enabled them to do these miracles in order to confirm the word. But when you get to verse 4, the trouble is brewing. The people of the city were divided. This is Iconium. They were divided. This is the people of the city, not just the synagogue. Are you listening to me? We're talking now not just about the small group of people that were in the synagogue, but the people of the city were divided. Some sided with the Jews and others with the apostles. So here the conflict is basically between the Jews, who are God's people, who do not accept the fulfillment of their prophets, who prophesied about the coming of the Messiah. And so some of the people in the city sided with the Jews, others with the apostles and these new converts. But by the time you get to verse 5, there was also a plot afoot. I like the language. This is why I'm actually using not the authorized version, but the newer version, the NIV, because I like the way it's explained. There was a plot afoot among the Gentiles and Jews, together with their leaders. So what you've now got is you've got a rebellion against Paul and Barnabas, and the rebellion is amongst both the Gentiles and the Jews, who together with their leaders conspired to mistreat them and stone them. This is unfortunately typical of what happens when you preach the truth. It was the Jews that stirred up the trouble. Now, I'm not speaking against Jews. No, I'm not, except that Jews who do not accept and recognize the Messiah are blind. And unfortunately, when I evangelized large scale in Israel, it was not the ordinary people, but the Orthodox Jews who, again, threw me out and banned me, actually, from evangelizing. So I get a lot of sympathy with what's happening to Paul and Barnabas. They were going to be stoned. With me, they simply put me in a detention center. But by the time you come to verse 6, Paul and Barnabas were to become aware of what was happening. They found out about this plot against them, and they fled. So where did they go? Well, it's quite interesting, but because they didn't go that far. Because if you're looking on a map, they followed into the Lycaonian cities of Lystra and Derbe and to the surrounding country, where they continued to preach the good news. So the rebellion against them was basically in Iconium, but that didn't stop them. Come on, that didn't stop them. All right, they fled, because if they'd been stoned, yes, as you can see later, they could have died. So to save their lives, they fled, but they didn't flee and stop preaching. They fled in order to evangelize and become missionaries and spread the gospel further afoot. So they are now in the whole of the countryside surrounding Iconium, in Lystra and Derbe and so on, and they continued to preach the good news. I mean, this is good news.